Hi, welcome to the Parenting Literacy Show. The purpose of this show is to help parents with raising children who are physically healthy, intelligent, happy, spiritual, and have good social skills. My name is Dr. Joseph Lau. I'm a developmental psychologist who's been studying how humans grow for more than 40 years. During the past 15 years, I've been studying parenting and how parents can raise their children most effectively. In this show, I have the privilege of speaking with people each week who are experts in some area that I think you should know about. Today I'd like to talk about STEM research and education for our children, especially in math and English and science courses. It's an issue that's of importance because we find that in the United States, we used to be ranked #1 in the world in 1990 in areas relating to math and science. However, in recent tests, we find that the United States has slipped to number 38 in I think it was math, and number 27, I believe, in other science courses. And so the United States has been falling below where we were before. We find that this is curious because we spend more money on education than almost any other country on earth. And so we'd expect to find our students getting better rather than getting worse compared to the rest of the world. It's also an issue because a study by the National Education Center, National Center for Education Statistics, has found that in the inner cities in the United States, less than 20% of students are performing at grade level in science. We find that about 25% of students who graduate from high school and go to college need to take remedial courses. And of those students taking remedial courses in college, about 70% of them have graduated from high school with at least a B average. And so that we need to do more as a country to educate our children. Having said that, I'm privileged today to be able to speak with Ms. Yvonne Thevenot, who is part of the solution to this problem. Ms. Thevenot has a bachelor's degree in information systems and has spent more than 10 years working with computers, including a number of years working on Wall Street with JP Morgan, where she was responsible for projects that were worth more than $2 billion. She has 2 master's degrees in education, and she's currently working on a doctoral degree at Columbia University in education. And so we're very fortunate to have her here today. Ms. Thevenot is involved in a program that is called STEM Kids in New York City. Let's begin by inviting you to say hello to her and introducing her. So Ms. Thevenot, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. And Dr. Lau, please call me Yvonne. Yes.
Okay, I'll be happy to. What is the STEM Kids New York City program?
Well, what it is, first of all, we're a nonprofit organization that I founded 5 years ago. And it's an organization that seeks to expose students who are pretty much in minoritized groups, in underrepresented groups, to computer science, to engineering and design, and robotics. And we start early. The intention behind that is when children are exposed to things early on, it helps them as they continue to develop a relationship with that phenomena. It helps shape their identity around it. Just like if we were to put a basketball in a child's hand from age 3 and continue along those lines, they'll eventually probably identify themselves as a basketball player. And my intention behind that is if I stick a robot or a computer, a laptop, and I teach a child early how to code, they're going to identify with themselves as a computer scientist and a basketball player. So the intention is not to usurp any identities, because everyone has multiple identities, but the intention there is to expose so the students can see that they have success in it and that possibly they can make choices in life around continuing along those lines. And STEM fields are the highest paid positions in this country, but also sought after in other countries as well.
Interesting. So you sound like you have a very strong background in computer science and working with high-level firms where you were presumably making a lot of money. So what made you get into this?
10 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was making a lot of money. And when I was married, my then husband was also making a lot of money. So we were really affluent. We were affluent African-American couple, and we had 1 child. And so we pretty much lived very well. But 10 years ago, just when life changes happen, at least to me, I had 2 life changes happen. I 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And also I found myself getting a divorce while going through chemotherapy. And through that, I really had a chance to kind of have introspection going on. And I told myself that if I got through these challenges, that I wanted a more purposeful life. That's really where it came from. And after seeking kind of inwardly to see kind of what enlivened me, it really was teaching. I was always volunteering ever since I went to college, I would volunteer in a literacy center where my student was a 33-year-old woman who could not read. And I worked with her for 4 years. And she wrote me a thank you letter, right before I was about to graduate. That was the best graduation present I got. And that was kind of like a testament to me that I'm always going to be working with those who are kind of the underdogs. And I'm going to work in those neighborhoods and teach and give what I know. So it just dawned on me that it enlivened me so much that I wanted to have that for myself all the time. So that's what caused me to weigh money, happiness, or true happiness. And that's really, not to sound corny or philosophical, but that's how I made my life choice.
So with your STEM Kids program, what kind of programs do you offer?
Yeah, we offer a number of programs. So during the school year, which is where we are right now, we tend to play in the after school space. So pre-COVID, schools would bring us in schools and community-based centers would bring us in where kids would come to our classrooms and we would facilitate our after school programs. Also, because we were doing a lot in schools during the Monday through Friday, we also had weekend programs. So we would pair up with, say, Society of Women Engineers at Columbia or the National Society of Black Engineers at Columbia. And so they would host us. So we would bring our kids on campus, so that the intention there was for them to be on campus and have a sense of belonging at a real university. But at the same time, interact with college students who would partner up with us, where we would do an engineering day, or we would have a tech fest and so on. So that's kind of what we did on the weekends, is pairing up with organizations like that.
That's a great idea. And what kind of topics do you teach in your courses?
We teach how to code, and basically that's how to make an app or how to make a game. So we're teaching computer science concepts layered down to that developmental level of the student, and showing them and introducing them to a coding site that is more appropriate for their learning level. And then they would produce products, so we would develop a lesson that was appropriate for the time that we would spend with the student. So before they leave, they would have a basic product. We also taught engineering. And so we would, teach circuits or teach mechanical engineering, where they would build something. So it might be a catapult, it might be a robot. And we would teach the basics of that, but also the intention there is to teach the topic, but also give students the ability to apply what they know in order to make some type of artifact to take home, so that was proof positive that they actually were successful in something. So that could be the conversation piece at home. Moms and dads would marvel over, oh my God, my son is so brilliant. He made this. But then the child has something in his or her room that says, I did this. So no matter what is happening in school, no matter if there's an IEP or there's a parent-teacher conference that's not going well, to tell that this child is struggling, at least the child and the parents know that their child does have talent and aptitude. So
when you describe this, it makes me think of these 5-year-olds building robots. And I suspect that it's perhaps not entirely realistic. So how do you approach children of different ages to make the topic understandable to them?
Exactly. So if we're introducing robotics, and we have, because 3 years ago, I started a STEM pre-K program. And so, no, I'm not going to teach a 3-year-old how to code, but we're going to immerse them heavily into science to have a lot more tactile and kinesthetic experiences with phenomenon, as well as engineering, because kids that age learn more by doing and observing than just sitting and listening to concepts. Their conceptual knowledge is not going to adapt that way. So for 5-year-olds, they're right there on the cusp. So we might introduce them to a robot that already works. It's already kind of put together. But then there are products out there that allow for the robot to say, scan a barcode, for example, that has different events or different actions. So there's usually pictures and words with that action, like move forward, go left, turn right, simple things that the child, we can help the child decide, where do you want the robot to go? Do you want the robot to go this way? So even if the child doesn't know right from left yet, the arrows will allow them to think about and make choices. And then we could help them develop what's called algorithms. I want my robot to go this way around a book and then go straight. And then we show them how to think about that in arrows or with the pictures that are in these coding cards or blocks, that now once the child decides on the program, they can then scan those cards and then see the reaction of what their program did.
So you can teach the same subject on different levels depending on the needs of the child.
Yeah, so if it's high school, we still teach algorithms, and we might say, or I've done this for elementary school students. I might say, okay, guys, we're going to learn, welcome to computer science hackathon. We're going to initially start off with developing an algorithm. So before we do that, I just want to see how many of you actually took the train here today. So this is like an in-person. So they would raise their hand, because I love making sure that students are bringing all their knowledge and any cultural assets and any knowledge assets to the table. And so that we're not just lecturing to them. So I would be at a whiteboard and I would say, okay, so who wants to share with me how you got here today? So everything they say, I'm just writing down, and I'm writing it down in a list. And then I'm going to say, actually, thank you so much, John. We actually just made an algorithm on how to get from your home to this place that we have at Columbia. So then I'll go out and say, okay, how many of you like peanut butter and jelly? And then I'll make a joke and say, for those of you who are, who have nut allergies, I don't mean to give you, fear, but this is just an exercise. We're not really going to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But then I'll say, what are all the steps that you take to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And then that's when I'm going to ask everybody just to call out. Doesn't matter, so I'm writing down all the steps because I want student engagement. And then I'm going to say, we just made an algorithm for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, what is an algorithm?
Great.
I can guarantee you that they'll know what it is and they'll be able to say it in their words, but knowing what an algorithm is and what it does is a very important concept to computer science. So the way that I like to structure curriculum is to not inundate with kind of front loading the concept, the academic concepts, before the student has actually I've created some type of situated learning experience with them. I've given them something that they can relate to actually be able to use their tacit knowledge with where I'm trying to go, so that they can have a little bit of a boost of confidence, like, oh, I'm going to use algorithms now in coding.
I can imagine the 5-year-old going home and saying, Mommy, I just developed an algorithm for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Exactly right? And the fact that they're 5 and they know the word, it's really kind of, so each time, now they have this word, it becomes a part of their language if we continue to use it. And therefore they see that word on a test, they don't like, oh, I don't know what this is. They know what it is because they have knowledge around it.
So there are a few questions here. First is, what is situated learning?
Yeah, situated learning, and it's not my word. It's, it comes from, Lev and Winger, 2 scholars, have really kind of taken that word and presented to the education community ways that one can immerse students who are of different, cultural assets or cultural knowledge, or no knowledge at all for that matter, and immerse them into what would be called a communities of practice. And that communities of practice is centered around a task that one would learn how to do. So if I created a communities of practice around learning algorithms, I've now created this, I've invited my students into this communities of practice to learn and use algorithms. But initially, I'm going to be using inquiry-based, kind of questioning to bring out what they already know, so that I can then reveal to them that they actually created an algorithm with me. And then from there, we can then use. So I created a situation. And then if, say, the person who may have been quiet the whole time, maybe they didn't even know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because it's possible. Maybe they've never made one before in their life. They are still in the room. And because they're listening as a bystander, they too are still participants in the learning. And so they will also come away with the knowledge of how to make, not only how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or at least a way, but also understand what an algorithm is, even if they don't participate in that first juncture. So the practice allows for the situation to really be the primary teacher. And I'm one of those learners with them, helping. I'm kind of like the master learner, helping them with, you know, deriving and coming to terms with the knowledge.
Now, this is a kind of learning that's got a lot of attention in the literature lately, and really for the last decade or so. And it's seen as a very promising way to teach children. But there's something else there that's important, and that is actually doing something, right? So that you're not just lecturing them, you're not just telling them a definition of an algorithm, but you're having them do something where they can connect what they're doing with their hands and, you know, with their bodies and so forth with the definition of the term, right? And so, you know, that's hugely important, because that doing is a way for them to make a connection with the concept, right? And not even just the word, but the concept. So if they learn, you know, the algorithm refers to some kind of procedure, right? Because you've given them the examples and they've done this, and then you tell them, well, this is what you just did, and you know, they then can associate what they did with the word.
That's right. And then not only that, if I peer in and I say go to a section of the table where my students are, and I just maybe want to know, like, what is in their head. So I'll just ask questions. So tell me more about, like, what did you learn when you started to first build on this robot, or what are you working on? And so they'll tell me. Maybe they're stuck on something. And so I'll, you know, we're there to come in and provide scaffolding if they really get stuck. But initially we just like if you had a little baby and you saw that they were trying to crawl for the first time, hopefully you're going to let them, you know, as long as they're not in harm's way, let them try to hoist themselves up on something that's stationary before you go over and, you know, try to help them. So it's kind of like that as well, where we're watching, but we're just kind of hovering to make sure, but we're also asking questions too, like, because I want to know what's going on in there. Like, I'm the type of teacher that I actually want, like, I teach online and I'm like, no, please unmute yourself. I teach younger kids science and engineering discovery at Teachers College Community School as part of to pay my tuition. And so, but it's fun. But the kids are conditioned to mute. And I'm like, no. I need you to unmute. Let's talk. I'm introducing what's called ichthyology, which is the study of fish, to them. And I need them to talk to me about what they know about fish already. So I can say, you're already an ichthyologist. You're like a budding ichthyologist. You know about fish already, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we do, is I like to know what the children are thinking or the students are thinking. But it's in there that I can pinpoint if they are moving along the right direction. Because maybe, you know, if they were doing a circuit, maybe they have their circuits mixed up, which is why the light doesn't come on. But I first need to know how they got to that point, so I know what I need to give to them to fix it.
Right. You mentioned another important concept that parents should know about, and that is scaffolding. Could you explain what that means?
Yeah, scaffolding is basically, if you just picture a building, and New York City has a lot of them, where they have those scaffolds all over the place just to keep things intact and provide support. So in education, the intention there is to provide scaffolding. Now, teachers, you know, use that word and actually implement it in different ways. But the intention of what I described as, I'm staying close to the student and I'm hearing what they have to say, but I'll be there to provide either a question to get them to do self-discovery, or I may say, well, let's take a look at this piece together. Oh, I noticed that you have two positive wires or two positive sides and not a positive and negative side. Do you see that now? And then I'll let them use their eyes to see. And then if they don't see it, then I say, let's go to the board. Let's review the infrastructure of a circuit. And we'll go back to what would have been an initial discussion around introducing circuits, because maybe they weren't listening, maybe they were talking, like I'm never going to call anybody out, but it's kind of like, let's go back and let's review this again. So I'm giving them additional reinforcement without making them feel bad. And that's really where scaffolding can be valuable.
So what's the real difference between just giving them the answers and scaffolding?
The difference is, I would say you care. The difference is between there is, do you care that the student can derive their own constructs of knowledge that they can use further? Or do you just want them to have the answer that might just stay in short-term memory for the test, and then they won't be able to use it afterwards?
And so by asking questions like that, even if they're leading questions, you help the child think more for him or herself. Right? So that stimulates critical thinking, which is hugely important.
Yeah, and there's another factor too, is I think I'm a very good read of people, especially kids. And so I can usually pick up on when a student actually needs you to hold their hand. Because if I see, like usually parents of younger children will stay in the room. And so I can tell that if a parent is the type that normally does for the child, then that child is not going to have enough confidence to do for him or herself. And they'll want me there to do. And that's where I will play the role of, I'm just going to be here, but I actually want you to try to do it yourself because you're brilliant, to try to get them to see that they can do it themselves. Or there might be some kids that are like hands off, no, I'm good. And then if I see that they're already ahead, then I'll probably allow them to be the first to present, especially if their peers are struggling. So I might say, hey guys, John over here actually got his circuit to work. I want you to come over just for a second, because I know that some of you are not at that point and some of you might be in a hurdle. So let's go over it, and John's going to explain a little bit about how he did it, and then John will explain. So I like to honor the students in the room who are kind of already ahead, so that they don't, first of all, don't get bored, because I've seen students where they're like waiting for everybody else to finish, and then the teacher will give them a book to read or something to doodle or nothing at all, and then they're acting out, and that's problematic.
So all these things are things that if you work with them a little while, they're seeing that they can do things they never even thought about before. That's got to be uplifting. So not just in terms of confidence per se, but also in terms of these other areas. And not to mention having skills that they can use later on, where they can get a job with paying $115,000 a year when they graduate from college or maybe even high school.
Exactly. Another thing that we do, Dr. Lau, is we introduce, I call them STEM icons. Someone is iconic, it's usually a superstar. But in STEM, people who work in STEM generally don't get lifted up as much unless they're like a superstar like Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody.
Yeah.
So what we do is we introduce the students to an icon that represents their cultural background or their gender. And it's in the subject, they're in the profession of the subject that we're teaching the student. So we do that every single day, a new icon for every lesson that we implement. And it's somebody that's living. So I do, give it up to those who in the 19th century and 18th century that were inventors, but I try to give students present day people who are living, Gen Xers even, Gen Zers, and even kids who might be prodigies in computer science, so that they can see that even though their textbooks may not show contributions of their culture in a particular field, that there is proof out there.
Yes, that's a good idea.
We got it from YouTube. Here's their website. That way, every day they can see that someone that looks like me is doing what I'm learning how to do.
That's a great idea. Now, is your program expensive for people, the children or parents whose children take the program?
Yeah, expenses is relative. But what we do is we make it affordable for everyone. So nobody ever gets turned away. And I have what's called sliding scale. So I use a fair determination of, everything comes to me. So we don't go through like a case worker type of, subjecting people to what I think might be humiliating sometimes. It's simply tell me what's going on, or share with me what's happening. I try to keep parents in the highest regard. I might even ask them, what do you do professionally if they're out of a job? Because I just know how that is. I mean, I came from a single parent household. my dad was never in and out of work, but the fact that I just recognize, I just, I just have a, I guess, a center of respect that I want to keep everybody whole, and everybody who I am interacting with feels taken care of. So if they have a profession that works in our program, I might ask the parent, do you have a couple hours to contribute that? And then it's free. Or if they're like, no, I have to go to work, but I'm just struggling, with these part-time hours, then I'll discount based on a particular scale, and then they'll get a percentage off.
So you try to make it a win-win situation for the parents.
I do, yeah.
Now, do I understand correctly that children can also take the program in the schools or maybe in community centers?
Yeah, so the community centers and the schools contract us. So my company is a DOE vendor. And so if it's a school that's a public school and that principal decides to use the DOE budget that they have allocated for extracurricular activities and enrichment, then they would just generate a purchase order, and then we would get the check directly from the city of New York.
I see. And where are your programs available?
Well, pre-COVID, they were available in Brooklyn, different neighborhoods in Brooklyn, such as Brownsville, Coney Island, Park Slope, Bay Ridge, Red Hook. I think that's all in Brooklyn. Queens, namely Long Island City. Okay. Harlem, Washington Heights, East Harlem, Midtown. And so now that we're doing everything virtually, some of those schools in those neighborhoods are now using us online.
Mm-hmm. So I understand that your program has expanded since you started it in 2015, was it, or 2016? So are you looking forward to having the program available in other boroughs as well, and perhaps nationally?
I did have dreams of expansion, and that dream is still out there, but it's going to be predicated on if a large company decides to fund that allows us to scale like that. So just to let you know, on Monday, I received a positive response to a grant application from Verizon.
Wonderful.
And it was it was a drop the phone type of moment when I read it, because I applied for a certain amount. They came back with something that was 150% over what I asked for.
Wow.
So now, in terms of expansion, and their intention is to fund organizations like mine so they can expand in, say, NYCHA housing and NYCHA communities. So that's where the funding is going to be used to have programs in those areas.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It is.
So we're running out of time. So where can somebody get more information about your program?
Sure. The name of the company is STEM Kids NYC. And so they can easily go to stemkidsnyc.org.
Okay, yeah. Great. I wish we had more time. It sounds like you're so knowledgeable about this area. We have so many things that we could discuss if we had more time. But thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Great, thank you. And for those of you who are listening today, I hope you've gotten something beneficial from the program, and I'll try to do my best to continue having conversations with interesting people like Ms. Thevenot in the future, or Thevenot, I'm sorry, in the future. All right, so thanks again and take care. Until next time.